I thought the weirdest part of my day would be driving across town in rush hour traffic to help my future sister-in-law pick out bridesmaid dresses. I was wrong. The weirdest part was crouching behind a rack of wedding gowns in a high-end bridal boutique, holding my breath while I listened to my fiancé, Jake, confess to crimes I never knew he'd committed. But let me back up, because nothing about that Tuesday afternoon made any sense, until suddenly, everything did. My name's Rachel Thompson, I'm 29 years old, and up until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I was marrying Jake Harrison, my boyfriend of 4 years, a software engineer who worked remotely for a tech startup. We lived in Portland, Oregon, had a golden retriever named Murphy, and a wedding planned for October 15th. Jake was smart, funny, considerate. He proposed last Valentine's Day on a hiking trail overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, and I said yes without hesitation. I loved him. I really loved him. And I thought he loved me the same way. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Together we made good money, could afford our apartment, vacations, and we were saving for a house with a yard for Murphy. Jake's younger sister Emily was getting married in August, 2 months before our wedding. She asked me to be a bridesmaid, and I was honored. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in late April, Emily texted me asking if I could meet her at this bridal boutique called Eternal Elegance. Over in the Pearl District, she needed to finalize her bridesmaid dress choices and wanted my opinion. I'd taken the afternoon off work, fought through downtown traffic, and finally found parking about 2 blocks away from the store. Eternal Elegance was one of those upscale places. You know the type. All white marble floors, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and racks of wedding gowns that probably cost more than my car. A pleasant middle-aged woman named Diane greeted me at the door, asked if I had an appointment. I explained I was meeting Emily Harrison for a bridesmaid fitting. Diane smiled warmly and said, "Oh yes, Emily's in fitting room 3. You can head right back. It's the last door on the left past the evening gown section." I thanked her, walked through the showroom, past mannequins draped in elaborate white dresses, toward the fitting room area. But as I got close to fitting room 3, I heard voices inside, and one of them wasn't Emily. It was Jake. I froze, my hand halfway to the doorknob. What was Jake doing here? He told me this morning he had back-to-back Zoom meetings all afternoon, said he'd be heads down working, probably wouldn't even break for lunch. But here he was, his voice clearly audible through the fitting room door, talking to someone, not Emily. The voice responding was male, older, rough around the edges. I didn't knock. Something in my gut, some instinct I couldn't name, told me not to announce my presence. Instead, I stood there in the hallway listening, and what I heard in those first few seconds made absolutely no sense. The older male voice said, "So you're telling me you can get access to the accounts by next Tuesday?" And Jake's voice, calm and businesslike, nothing like his usual relaxed tone, replied, "Yeah, I've been laying the groundwork for 3 months. My supervisor doesn't suspect anything. I'll have full administrator access by Monday afternoon. Can initiate the transfers Tuesday morning before anyone notices." My heart started pounding, hard and fast. Transfers? Accounts? What was he talking about? The older voice again, "And you're absolutely sure you can move the money without triggering any automatic alerts?" Jake, sounding almost proud, "That's literally my job, man. I built half the security protocols myself. I know every backdoor, every blind spot. We can move $2.5 million before the fraud detection even starts running analyses. And by the time anyone figures out what happened, the money will be overseas, untraceable." 2.5 million? I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My fiancé, my sweet, considerate, dependable Jake, was casually discussing, what, embezzlement, theft, some kind of massive financial fraud? I should have burst through that door right then, demanded explanations. But I was frozen, absolutely paralyzed, my brain refusing to process what my ears were hearing. Then I heard footsteps approaching from the main showroom, the click-click of heels on marble. Diane's voice called out cheerfully, "Ms. Thompson, are you finding everything all right?" Panic flooded through me. If Diane came down this hallway, if Jake heard my name, he'd know I was here. He'd know I'd heard. And some primitive survival instinct, completely irrational but overpowering, screamed at me to hide. I looked around frantically. The hallway was narrow, lined with doors to fitting rooms, and at the very end, a large rolling rack of wedding dresses, samples waiting to be steamed and returned to the showroom floor. Without thinking, I ducked behind that rack, wedging myself between the wall and the layers of white tulle and satin, pulling the dresses around me like a curtain. Just in time. Diane's footsteps came down the hallway, paused right outside fitting room 3. She knocked lightly. "Excuse me, is everything all right in there? I have a client who needs this room in about 15 minutes. Silence. Then Jake's voice, smooth and polite, completely normal. "Oh, sorry, we're just wrapping up. We'll be out in 2 minutes." Diane's footsteps retreated back toward the showroom, and I stayed hidden behind the wedding dresses, my heart hammering, barely breathing, listening. The older male voice now with an edge of irritation. "We can't talk here anymore. Too risky. Meet me at the usual spot Thursday night, 10 p.m. We'll finalize everything then." Jake. "Yeah, got it. Thursday at 10. I heard movement, the sound of the fitting room door opening. I pressed myself further back against the wall, praying they wouldn't look down the hallway. Wouldn't notice the wedding dress rack had a person-shaped bulge behind it. They didn't. I heard 2 sets of footsteps heading toward the front of the store. Jake's voice, friendly and casual, speaking to Diane. "Thanks so much for letting us use the fitting room. We appreciate it." Diane, sounding confused. "Oh, of course. But weren't you meeting Emily Harrison?" And Jake, without missing a beat, lying so smoothly it made my skin crawl. "Oh, Emily had to cancel last minute. Work emergency. She asked me to scope out the place for her fiancé. Get a sense of prices for the wedding planning. My sister's getting married soon, too. Wanted some recommendations." Diane bought it completely. "How lovely. Well, we'd be happy to work with your sister when she's ready." Then the bell above the shop door chimed, and they were gone. I stayed hidden for another full minute, maybe longer, just breathing, trying to stop shaking. Then I carefully emerged from behind the wedding dresses, smoothed down my wrinkled blouse, and walked on trembling legs back toward the showroom. Diane was at the front desk, typing something on her computer. She looked up and smiled. "Oh, Ms. Thompson, I'm so sorry Emily Harrison called to cancel. She said she'd text you. Did you not get it?" I pulled out my phone. Sure enough, there was a text from Emily sent 20 minutes ago. "So sorry, Rach. Total work crisis. Have to cancel fitting. Can we reschedule for next week? I owe you big time." I stared at that text. Emily had canceled. Jake knew Emily had canceled because Emily was his sister. So why had he come to this bridal boutique? Why had he been in that fitting room having a conversation about stealing $2.5 million? I forced myself to smile at Diane. "Yeah, I just saw the text. No problem. I'll head out. Thanks anyway." I walked back to my car in a daze, sat behind the wheel staring at nothing, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it was, I don't know, some weird joke? A podcast he was listening to? Some kind of role-playing thing? But no. The conversation had been too specific, too detailed. Jake had been planning something illegal. Something that involved stealing millions of dollars from his employer, the tech startup where he'd worked for 3 years. I drove home on autopilot, parked in our usual spot, walked up the stairs to our apartment, unlocked the door. Jake was sitting on the couch with his laptop exactly where he'd been when I left. Murphy was sprawled at his feet. Jake looked up and smiled, his normal, warm, genuine smile. "Hey, babe, how'd the dress fitting go?" I stood in the doorway, my purse still over my shoulder, staring at him. This man I loved, this man I was supposed to marry in 6 months. And I heard myself say, in a voice that didn't sound like mine, "Emily canceled." "Oh no, really? That's annoying. You drove all the way out there for nothing?" "Yeah, for nothing." He turned back to his laptop. "Sorry, babe. Want me to order pizza for dinner?" And I stood there, watching him. This person I thought I knew, and realized I didn't know him at all. Over the next 3 days, I became someone I never thought I'd be. I became a spy, an investigator. I waited until Jake was in the shower, then I went through his laptop, searching his browser history, his files, his emails. I found encrypted folders I'd never noticed before. I found messaging apps I didn't recognize. And in one folder, buried deep in his system files, I found spreadsheets, detailed spreadsheets, tracking his access to his company's financial systems, notes about security protocols, timelines, and a document titled Exit Strategy, outlining how he planned to move money through a series of offshore accounts, then disappear. Disappear. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely scroll through the files. This wasn't just embezzlement. Jake was planning to steal millions of dollars and run, leave the country, start over somewhere else. And then I found another folder titled R, Aftermath. I opened it. It was a letter, addressed to me. "Rachel, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but I got involved in something way over my head about a year ago. I owed money to some very dangerous people. Gambling debts from online poker that spiraled out of control. They threatened to hurt you, to hurt my family, if I didn't find a way to pay them back. The only way I could get that kind of money was... Well, you'll probably hear about it on the news. I want you to know that everything I felt for you was real. I love you. I always will. But I couldn't let them hurt you, and I couldn't tell you the truth. This was the only way. Please don't try to find me. Move on. Be happy. You deserve better than what I could give you. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you thought I was. Love always, Jake." I read that letter 3 times. Then I closed the laptop, walked into our bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and cried. Not gentle tears, deep, gut-wrenching sobs that felt like they were tearing me apart from the inside. He'd been lying to me for a year, an entire year. Every "I love you," every Sunday brunch, every time he'd held me and promised we'd build a life together. He'd been planning to abandon me, to steal millions of dollars, ruin his company, destroy his career, and just vanish into thin air. When the crying finally stopped, I felt hollow, empty, but also, strangely, clear-headed. I wasn't going to let him do this. I wasn't going to let him steal that money, and I wasn't going to let him leave me with the wreckage of his choices. Thursday night, 9:45 p.m., I told Jake I was going to my friend Sarah's place for a girls' night. He barely looked up from his laptop, just kissed me goodbye, told me to have fun. Instead, I drove to the address I'd found in Jake's files. The usual spot. It was a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor, in a sketchy part of southeast Portland. I parked half a block away, pulled my hood up, walked to the bar. Jake's car was already there. I recognized it in the parking lot. I slipped inside. The place was dimly lit, smelled like stale beer and cigarettes. There were maybe 15 people scattered around, a few at the bar, a couple playing pool, some in booths along the walls. And there, in a corner booth, way in the back, was Jake, sitting across from a man in his 50s, heavy set, wearing a leather jacket. The same older male voice from the bridal boutique conversation. I found a spot at the bar, ordered a Coke, kept my head down. But I could hear them. Their booth was close enough. The older man was saying, "So Tuesday morning, you initiate the transfers. Money goes into these 3 accounts." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "By Tuesday afternoon, you're on a flight to Mexico City. We've got someone who'll meet you there, get you the new documents. New name, new passport, whole new identity." Jake's voice quieter. And you're sure Rachel won't be implicated? I don't want her caught up in this." The older man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Kid, when $2.5 million disappears from a tech company, they're gonna investigate everyone. Your girlfriend, your family, your college roommate. FBI's gonna tear through her whole life. Can't promise she won't get questioned. But as long as she genuinely doesn't know anything, she'll be fine. Eventually. 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 They'd put me through hell, questioning me, suspecting me. And Jake would be living on a beach in Mexico with a fake name. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Rage. Pure, focused rage. I stood up, walked over to their booth, and said clearly, "Actually, I do know something." Jake's face, I'll never forget the expression. Shock, horror, disbelief. His mouth literally fell open. "Rachel, how?" I slid into the booth next to the older man, who looked at me with narrowed eyes. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and hit play. Their voices filled the bar. The conversation from the bridal boutique, the transfers, the $2.5 million, every incriminating word. "I've also got screenshots of every file on your laptop," I said calmly, looking directly at Jake. "The spreadsheets, the exit strategy, the letter you wrote me. And I've already emailed everything to an attorney. A criminal defense attorney, actually, who's holding it in trust. If I don't check in with her by midnight tonight, she sends everything to the FBI, every single file." The older man stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. He looked at Jake with pure contempt. "You idiot! You brought your girlfriend into this?" "I didn't." Jake's voice cracked. "I didn't tell her anything." "She figured it out herself," I said. "Turns out, when you spend 4 years with someone, you get pretty good at noticing when they're lying." The older man leaned down close to Jake's face. "You're on your own, kid. I want nothing to do with this mess." He walked out of the bar without looking back. Jake and I sat there in silence. Finally, he whispered, "What are you going to do?" "What am I going to do?" I repeated. "I'm going to give you 2 choices, Jake. Choice 1. You turn yourself in. Tonight. You call the FBI. You confess to planning the theft. You cooperate fully. Maybe. Maybe they'll go easier on you because you didn't actually steal anything yet. Maybe you do a few years instead of 10 or 15. And choice 2? Choice 2, I said quietly. I send everything to the FBI myself. You get arrested. You go to prison. And I testify against you at trial. About the gambling debts, the lies, the whole thing. I make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." He stared at me. Tears were running down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. I never meant for any of this." "You meant all of it," I interrupted. "You made choices. Every single day for a year, you chose to lie to me. You chose to plan this. You chose to write me a goodbye letter instead of asking for help." I stood up. "You have until midnight to decide. Turn yourself in, or I do it for you." I walked out of that bar, drove home, packed a bag, and went to Sarah's apartment. She took one look at my face and just held me while I fell apart. Jake turned himself in at 11:30 that night, called the FBI field office, confessed everything. They arrested him the next morning. The investigation took months. Turns out Jake owed almost $400,000 to an illegal gambling operation. He'd gotten in deep with online poker, then sports betting, then trying to win it all back with higher and higher stakes. The older man at the bar was a loan shark, someone who'd offered to help Jake get the money if he pulled off the heist. Jake pled guilty to conspiracy, to commit wire fraud and embezzlement. He got 5 years in federal prison. His lawyer tried to get me to testify on his behalf, talk about what a good person he was, how he'd made a mistake. I declined. I broke off our engagement 2 days after his arrest, sold the ring, moved out of our apartment. Murphy went to live with my parents because I couldn't handle having a reminder of Jake every single day. Emily called me, crying, apologizing for her brother's actions. I told her it wasn't her fault, that I didn't blame her, but I also told her I couldn't stay in touch. It hurt too much. That was 3 months ago. I'm living in a studio apartment in Northwest Portland now. I got a promotion at work, started seeing a therapist, trying to process everything, and slowly, very slowly, I'm rebuilding. Sometimes I think about that Tuesday afternoon, about hiding behind those wedding dresses, listening to my future collapse in real time, about how close I came to marrying someone who was planning to abandon me, leave me to face the FBI alone. Marina, the secretary in the original story, saved the woman by making her hide. I saved myself by choosing to hide, by trusting my instincts when something felt wrong, and then by choosing to act instead of staying silent. I learned something important. Love isn't enough. Trust has to be earned, not assumed. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Not who you hope they are, not who they pretend to be, who they actually are. Jake's in prison now. I hope he gets the help he needs for his addiction. I genuinely do, but I also know I'll never forgive him for what he planned to do, for the lies, for the betrayal, for treating our relationship like something disposable. I thought the strangest moment of my life would be hiding behind wedding dresses in a bridal boutique. I was wrong. The strangest moment was realizing the man I loved never really existed at all. He was just a character Jake played for 4 years, and when the stakes got high enough, that character disappeared, revealing someone I never knew. But here's what I also learned. I'm stronger than I thought, braver than I believed, and I deserve a partner who won't lie to me, won't plan to abandon me, won't treat my life as collateral damage to their bad choices. Someday, maybe I'll trust someone again. Maybe I'll fall in love. But this time, I'll keep my eyes open. I'll trust my instincts. And if something feels wrong, I won't ignore it. Because sometimes, the worst moments, standing behind a rack of wedding dresses, listening to your life shatter, lead to the most important realizations. I deserved better. I still deserve better. And I'm not going to settle for anything less. That secretary whispered, "Hide in the closet." My instincts whispered, "Something's wrong." And I'm grateful I listened, even though I wish I'd never needed to hear that whisper in the first place.